Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, and I am fresh from a little bit of culture, and which fits in nicely with the topic of today. The good lady non-Beatles fan and I have been to Stratford to see the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of Cyrano de Bergerac, which is, of course, all about someone who can change emotions through his words and expressing how he feels. Um, um, a writer, if you like, who is able to conjure up wonderful romantic images in order to persuade the lovely Roxanne that despite his visage, he is worth loving. I mean, it's. I mean, I'm almost kind of describing the Steve Martin, uh, um, film version of it. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, and a heck of a lot more tragic. But yeah, it was just sort of interesting that having been to see that, we are then talking about Paperback Writer.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Yeah, lovely parallels there. Thank you for that. Um, yeah, we have left 1965 behind.
Woohoo!
We are plummeting headfirst into 1966. Is that the
Plummeting,
correct plummeting? We
plummeting.
are.
Do
I
you
don't know. Pick
plummet
it.
head? You dive head first.
Well, if you do it properly.
Fall. I suppose you rotate while you're plummeting. But we're into 66.
Yes, we are. And we have left Rubber Soul behind, and we are moving towards Revolver territory. But before we get there, we have two songs to cover, and this is the first of them. So this is Paperback Writer, and I'm going to start this one because I know that you and I have slightly differing opinions on this one.
Actually, before that, I think it's worth stressing, just reminding our loyal fan base that the reason we're doing this first is because of its release as a single, and we always sort of then like to focus on what gets released first. So the single gets released in the UK on the 10th of June, whereas the album is released on the 5th of August. However, it is not the first thing that they approach in the recording for 1966, because I think one of the things that people, very kind of general fans won't appreciate is that the very first thing that they record for this album and in this block is Tomorrow Never Knows, which is just mind blowing. That's the first thing that they attempt, and I think the context of that is important, because I think once you know that, and if you know that, it then, and this is where I'm going to start to annoy you. It then makes Paperback Writer feel a little bit retro and a little bit odd that we've taken this leap into the future with Tomorrow Never Knows, and then also Love You To as well, which just sounds so different to anything that Georgie Boy's done before. And we get Paperback Writer. The floor is yours.
Well, I adore this song. I absolutely love Paperback Writer. And I will try not to swear during this episode, although as you're aware, that's not always something I'm particularly successful at doing.
Me,
But really, sorry?
at me, I swear at
At you,
me.
yes. I swear. Well, no, I swear in general. I don't swear at you. I just, like, for example, I would
You
say
might
I
do.
fucking love this song. I am
Okay.
swearing, but I'm not swearing at you.
Not yet, you're
It
not.
is merely an expression of my enthusiasm. Well, yeah, yeah. There's time. There's time. I adore this song. It's actually very interesting in a way that you mentioned. Tomorrow Never Knows, because one of the things that the two songs have in common is the very small number of chords that they are written on. Tomorrow Never Knows famously is based around one chord. It's based around a drone. There's only two chords in Paperback Writer. So musically, they're actually a lot closer than you might imagine, or that one might imagine. Sorry, I don't want to impose upon you. So yeah, the fact that this is simply based around a simple two chord sequence actually brings it musically much closer than Tomorrow Never Knows than it looks like on the surface. And I I'm more inclined to look at this in terms of kind of the release rather than the recording. So in this case, it's following directly on from Run for Your Life in terms of what we're covering. I know we did Bad Boy in between, but let that not delay us further. That's neither helping my argument nor anybody else. So the sort of night and day between something like Run for Your Life and Paperback Writer is just startling. We're kind of really leaving behind the kind of the stoner influence of Rubber Soul, the folksy stuff. This is sharp. It is bright. The guitar sounds astonishing on this. McCartney's bass is everything. Like Ringo's on fire. That it's such a well constructed piece. Everything is doing exactly what it should be, and it feels like such a blast of fresh energy after kind of the end of the Rubber Soul era. And I don't mean that as an insult to the Rubber Soul period, because I love that period as well. But it's sort of tonally and emotionally a very different thing. This is bright, it's driving, it's forward looking, in a way that particularly the back half of Rubber Soul I don't particularly think is. And again, that's not to disparage that particularly, but this really feels like it's moving into a new era for the band. In fact, I would go slightly further and say in many ways Paperback Writer is kind of the hinge around the first half and second half of the Beatles' career. And what a hinge it is. It's just astonishing. I love this as a piece of music. Over to you.
Um, the, the things that I've seen suggest it's one chord rather than two.
No, it's definitely two. It definitely shifts between G7th and C7th. There's no question. I was playing this earlier on. It's definitely a two-chord song.
I don't care.
No.
Okay. I'm just after all you've said about this being the hinge and moving on and so different from.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to the last interview that Lennon gave. And whilst I know he's prone to change his mind. He refers to it as you probably know this, dear listener, as son of day tripper. And he's asked, what does that mean? He says, meaning a rock and roll song with a guitar lick on a fuzzy, loud guitar. Which he acknowledges it's Paul's song, completely Paul's song. Um, and I think there's kind of a point now. I think it is Paul's version of Day Tripper. And maybe you could point to the bits where they're then sort of bringing it forward. But I think it's just for me it's another one of those. It's a decent enough song. There are some bits that are really great with me that we'll get onto. It's a decent enough song. It works as a single, but I think if you start to examine it too closely, you start to see some things that don't quite stack up. In terms of the bits that do stack up, that guitar line is really really good, and you can sort of see perhaps a connection between some of the guitar work on those singles and then things that are on things like the guitar playing on Taxman, for example, which may there are suggestions that it's McCartney playing the guitar on this. There are some suggestions that it's McCartney basically dictating to Harrison exactly what he should play, but I think there's enough doubt that we don't know who was actually playing it, although people have written books about less. Um, but the other thing that stands out for me more than anything else on this is our good friend Mr. Richard Starkey, who's having a whale of a time on the drums. He's absolutely loving life back there playing on this. You can just imagine him, shaking his hair all over as he's just going to town on this. And I think without Mr. Starkey, this would be perhaps a little bit underwhelming.
Okay. I mean, I'm absolutely not going to disagree with you with El Ringo. I think he's astonishing in this song, and I think you can see how this is what things are going to be like for him on the upcoming album. This is absolutely the sort of quality of playing that we can expect, and it's really amazing. It's fantastic. Ringo is amazing. That snap on the drum that you get after the 4-part harmony at the introduction is just an astonishing statement of intent. It belts you in the face, and the song kicks off after that. And Lennon's comment about it being son of Day Tripper is probably fair, but also I don't think that's pejorative particularly. I don't think, and I don't think it's a bad thing either. It clearly is working in the same oeuvre. It's a very low number of chords. It's mostly a riff-driven song. I think this is better than Day Tripper by some margin, in fact. But that's, again, not to disparage Day Tripper, which is a phenomenal song. But the fact that McCartney has been able to do something, I think, a little bit, I don't know. I just think it's better. You're not kind of. I'm saying that as if we're supposed to be analyzing this, and I kind of like agree with you when you say maybe it is a song where you can sort of appreciate it without it necessarily having to have that great analytical depth behind it. I think there is a grain of truth in that for sure. But the fact that a song is the son of something or is a development on from something. I mean, I think you mentioned it previously, but you had that triptych of Lennon songs that you struggle to sort of sometimes tell the difference.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Day Tripper,
yeah, Help,
Ticket to Ride, and then something
yeah,
else.
and possibly Help. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that doesn't mean that any of those songs are necessarily
No.
bad or not
No.
or unworthy of appreciation, but each one is, they're working in similar modes, but maybe each one is a bit of a development on from the previous, or tries to build on work which had previously been done. So if this is McCartney's attempt to write a song in kind of Lennon's oeuvre or mode, I think not only does he do it as well, in fact, I would suggest he does it better. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing Day Tripper. I'm not. I love Day Tripper, but I do think that this is a better song.
I think the guitar has certainly has more power here. I think that for all that Day Tripper's um, guitar line is lauded, it doesn't quite have the same production and amplification behind it. It can sound a little bit, weedy after a while. But I think that the harmonies on Day Tripper are, and this is sort of interesting how, again, it's a reminder that people can often come at the same thing from a completely different angle, and that subjectivity is important. I think the harmonies on Day Tripper are so much more effective. There's so much more nuance behind it, whereas I think these 4-part harmonies are just a way of making up for the absence of a decent introduction and a decent way of getting from the chorus back to the verse. I just think it just gets in the way. It's like, McCartney, come on, man, write something. Don't do this thing where everything's just going to go on hold, so you can all sort of do your, standing around doing your harmonies and looking how clever you are and sounding a bit like the Beach Boys. And isn't this a move forward? You think, no, it's twee. It doesn't work for me.
That's fair enough. Yeah, and this is absolutely where the subjectivity is going to come in, because again, I definitely disagree with that. I love the harmonies in this. I think they're an incredibly effective and unusual way for a Beatles song to start. In fact, there is no other Beatles song that has started like this up to this point. And I love the moments of dramatic sort of tension that they add throughout the song when we come back to them. Are they clearly Beach Boys influenced? Yeah, of course, beyond all question. There's no doubt about that. But I still think they're incredibly effectively realized. I think they're really well performed, and I really love what they add to the song. And there's some talk about the backing vocals and the fact that at one point John and George are clearly singing Frere Jacques and stuff like that. But also, I love that too. I think it's funny, and that's great. This isn't meant to be a serious song. This is an enjoyable, entertaining song. The fact that they're slightly taking the piss just kind of enhances that on the backing vocals. But for the main harmonies, I love those harmony blocks. I think they're really astonishing, and I love them as another thing that the Beatles are kind of really bringing to what they can do. They are certainly different from the ones on Day Tripper, and technically I think the ones in Day Tripper are probably better, but I still absolutely adore these.
We're not going to persuade each other of our respective view there, are we?
No,
I
but
mean,
that's
it's
that's okay. It's not about persuading each other. It's about presenting different points of view in the same
yeah,
material. So that's fine.
yeah, and good on you, Paul, for trying something a little bit different in the lyrics as well.
Yeah, what do you make of the lyrics then? Because
Well,
we haven't really touched on that aspect yet.
I think that when I first heard this, all those years ago, I probably thought it was, absolutely amazing. But then I think at that point I probably did want to be a writer of things that could be put into paperback. So it was like, ooh, this kind of speaks to me. And then um, and there are some interesting parts in it. There's it's a dirty story of a dirty man and his clean wife doesn't understand. So potentially there's a link there to the whole kind of kitchen sink dramas of the the early '60s, mid '60s, um, it is different, and there is a sense of development in there. But I'm also thinking you don't apply for a job as a paperback writer, which is, a little bit weird. I need a job, so I want to be a paperback writer. No, okay, you might need a job to support yourself while you're writing a paperback and attempting to get it published, Paul, but I don't think it works this way around. Anyway, we're not expecting him to be an expert on the subject. He's also very, very confident. This paperback writer, isn't it? If you really like it, you can have the rights. It could make 1 million for you overnight. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we all beef up our CVs when we
Yeah,
apply
we
for
we do.
jobs, right?
Yeah, yeah. Although interestingly, I mean, he didn't write a novel, did he? I mean,
Still time.
well, yeah, wouldn't be surprised. John was more likely to have a go at that kind of thing, I guess. Um, yeah, I mean, it works, and there's lots of interesting language in there, which is great. Dear sir or madam, will you read my book? I like that. That's fantastic. Interesting that he picks Leah. Um, so there's interesting little bits in there, but then just don't look at them too closely. And that's the important bit. But also, I have to say, it works even without you really understanding the lyrics. And for that, I'm gonna sort of, bring in a little story in the Craig Brown book.
An
Um,
excellent book, by the way. Thank you for recommending it to me previously. Oh, it was a while back, but it really is a great book.
yeah, so I mean, he makes the point in here that some people might have thought that the song was referring to "Take the Back Right Turn" or "Paperback Right Turn," for example. That perhaps "paperback writer" might not be an obvious thing when you hear it. So it says when the songwriter Bobby Hart first heard it in '66, he imagined the Beatles were singing "Take the Last Train." By the time he realised it was Paperback Writer, it was too late. The wrong words had lodged in his brain. 3 months later, he was trying to write a debut single for the Monkees. Asked by the management for something that sounded like the Beatles, he composed a song from the misheard line, "Take the Last Train to Clarksville," it began, and took the Monkees to #1 in the US charts. And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that I mean. We could spend half an hour analysing the lyrics, looking at them, but actually they kind of work with the tune, especially if you don't pay too much attention to them. It's a bit of fun. Let's not look into it too deeply, and other people have got lots out of it in a way that then inspired them to do something brilliant, assuming that story is actually true rather than apocryphal. So let's take it on that basis. It's 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 perfectly fine. It's perfectly fun. Just don't make me think about it too deeply because I'm just going to go, oh my god, the vocals, oh my god, the lyrics, and I don't want to do that because it's okay. It's just not as good as Day Tripper. We Can Work It Out, Help, Hard Day's Night. I nearly said a hard rain's going to fall. But you see what I mean.
Yeah, I see where you're going. I mean, I agree with some of that. Also, just to add, obviously, Last Train to Clarksville is an amazing song,
Yeah.
just an amazing song. So if Paperback Writer genuinely birthed that, then that alone makes it worthwhile. Even if it wasn't an astonishingly good song in its own right, which it absolutely is. I think it's kind of interesting that we're back to kind of letter writing songs as well, but it's not a letter writing song of a type that we've ever seen before. You know, there's 4 years between this and P.S. I Love You, to take an obvious starting point, because that's kind of the first letter song that they wrote slash recorded. Yeah, I think you can probably see there's been a bit of a development there. And it's just interesting that it's returning to that kind of structure, that kind of form. We've had other examples of it, of course. But it's not one that is necessarily an obvious go-to at this point in their career. So just using that perspective alone, I think is quite interesting, and using it as a character piece. It's not a, oh, well, we'll get together again and we love each other and I miss you dreadfully and blah, blah, blah. It's none of that stuff. It's really being written as a character piece. And McCartney will go on to write some really interesting sort of character piece songs going forward. Probably don't have to name the most obvious one on the album coming up, but it's interesting to see that he's starting to play around with the form and the content in a way that I think is obviously more sophisticated than he has managed before. And I know like a few people have said, oh, the song is maybe it's trying to be a bit too clever. I don't really know what too clever means. It's just clever. But it's kind of successful in that, if that's genuinely what he was going for. Like he's playing around with form, he's playing around with a way that he can develop characters. And you know, if you have a look at the way that, say, Eleanor Rigby is developed in comparison to this, they are very different ways to try and establish characters, or obviously Eleanor Rigby is more than one in the song, but it's interesting to see that McCartney has enough kind of lyrical insight to find other ways of presenting that kind of material, and that's great. I love that development in his writing style, and I'm really looking forward to where it's going to go.
It was the first Beatles single for a while not to enter the charts at number one. It failed to knock off "Strangers in the Night" by Uncle Frank, which I think is I think it's perfectly okay not to have been able to dispose or beat "Strangers in the Night" to the number one spot. But there's a lot of really interesting songs around, and I'm not talking about you, Ken Dodd, with "Promises" at number eight. Um,
Nobody's ever talking about Ken Dodd in his musical career. It's fine.
you've got the Yardbirds in the top 10. I don't know the song "Over, Under, Sideways, Down," or maybe I do, but I don't know. But I don't know by the title. You've got "Wild Thing" by the Trogs. You've got "Paint It Black." You've got Percy Sledge with "When a Man Loves a Woman," and "Monday, Monday" by the Mamas and the Papas as well. There's some really interesting stuff around. Just outside the top 10, you've got "Sloop John B." Oh, "Sunny Afternoon" by the Kinks, "Rainy Day Women" numbers 12 and 35 by Bob Dylan. You've got the Small Faces, you've got Sandy Shaw, you've got "River Deep Mountain High," Ike and Tina Turner. I mean, this is a real phenomenal time for singles being released. And then even further down, the other new entries in the top 30, the only other new entries are Simon and Garfunkel's "I'm a Rock" and James Brown, "It's a Man's World." And they're alongside such things as languishing down in the bottom of the top 30 as "8 Miles High" by the Byrds and "Dusty, You Don't Have to Say You Love Me." I mean, so much of this is really brilliant stuff. Um, I mean, what an amazing time to have been a music fan. Absolutely phenomenal. The depth. I mean, remember when we started talking about some of these charts, either with albums or singles when they were released. We sort of have a little laugh at just how many weird things were in there, how many things that were perhaps legacies of a bygone era. and it's greatly reduced. It's the sort of a time where it's like Tom Jones is looking like the one who's a man out of time. Um, it's it's fascinating to see the progress, and but then it is also then interesting to see that with things like 8 Miles High, and it's a man's world, that there are musically some really fascinating ideas going on here, which to me then does kind of make Son of Day Tripper kind of resonate a little bit more. Um, that we're waiting for the Beatles to really hit the extra bit of originality with their singles again, which isn't going to come for a while. And we'll discuss Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, and the Penny Lane bit is interesting because the Penny Lane managed to sound both retro and contemporary, which is fascinating. But then this is only in the top 10 for 5 weeks as well. It's only in the charts for 11 weeks, so it kind of fades quite quickly, which is interesting. I don't know why. I'm not necessarily suggesting that's evidence to support my theory that it's a bit kind of meh as far as Beatles singles go, or whether it's just a sort of a change in general. Because after all, 1967, they don't even get the number one anymore. So who knows what pattern? And maybe it's because of that people are out buying all of these other records that it doesn't hit number one in the first week. And it
Although
doesn't.
to be clear, it does still hit number one. It does
Oh, it does.
eventually.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
does get
yeah,
there
yeah.
in non-consecutive weeks.
Two
But
and
yeah,
three.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does. So I just think those sort of little bits are interesting. Um, in not in a sense that the Beatles are becoming less popular or less good, but just there's so much more going on out there in the musical world. Um, and I suppose also with some like Strangers in the Night as well, it's almost like peak Sinatra as well. It's probably one of those songs. If you were to sit down, people with a vaguely general musical knowledge say, "Well, name me five Frank Sinatra songs." Well, they might get stuck after "Come Fly with Me," "Strangers in the Night," and oh, what's that one about the rubber tree plant? Things like that. New York, and My Way, and I don't know, but uh, I just think that I don't know what I'm saying anymore, and you might need to edit this, which is good, in order to cut out all of my ums.
No, no, I'll look forward to that. I'll leave them all in for authenticity. Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but also like the fact that there's a bit of a break between releases can really impact stuff as well. It's not like this is material which is being constantly pumped out. Is it almost like a 6 month break, I think, between releases or something? And yeah, there's a lot of other things going on in the charts, and that can lead to people being less inclined to just grab it as the first thing that they go for when they go to the record shop. I don't think it's. I mean, I think it's clear from what I've said so far. I don't think that that's indicative of the quality of the song at all. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting developments in music coming through now. Just as a quick aside, my God, I love the Kinks' "Sunny Afternoon" so much. What an amazing song! Just adore that song. But it's interesting. All these different forms. It's really interesting that we're now starting to see like black artists starting to make a proper impression in the track is in the charts as well, which we haven't seen a great deal of up to this point. But yeah, like you say, you've got James Brown, you've got Ike and Tina, you've got all these artists who are coming through who aren't just who aren't either legacy acts or the old Louis Armstrongs or whatever, but you're getting real diversity starting to appear now, and that's fantastic as well. And all of that again is in no way diminishing what the Beatles are achieving, but it's really interesting to see that there are proper actual developments happening now that are moving the walls of what is capable of existing within like a pop music sphere. And I think to a small extent you get a little bit of that with Paperback Writer. One of the things that I think is really, really impressive on this is the production. You mentioned kind of just how punchy and live the guitar sound is, which is absolutely true. And it's true of the bass as well. McCartney's bass just sounds phenomenal on this, and that's partly because he found interesting ways of recording it, and partly because she's playing the Rickenbacker now rather than the Hofner or Hufner, if you prefer. But it really sounds good, and the echoes, which are on the harmony vocals as well, the way they pull and they're timed so perfectly. Some really amazing work from George Martin there as well, and it's all prefiguring what we're going to get coming up. It's the start of what we're going to feel as we go through Revolver. So we're in a really interesting place musically, both with the Beatles and with the sort of wider culture. And yeah, I think we're going to have some really, really interesting discussions going forward around all of this because it really feels like things are moving now.
When this was released, they well, just before it was released, they had recorded Top of the Pops, and they'd done something for ITV as well, in order to promote it. But then they're off on tour. So 2 days after the release of this, they're in Germany. They play half a dozen dates in Germany. Then they head over to Japan, and then they're in America as well. So there's not really any publicity. So and by the time it's out of the charts, they're on their way back from Candlestick Park as well. So um, I'd be interested to know if, and I've not sort of looked into anything on this, whether or not there was a view at the time that perhaps, much like the Beatles left Liverpool behind by moving to London, whether or not people had started to feel that they had maybe left Britain behind because they weren't playing live dates in the UK anymore. And have you come across any contemporary reaction as well to them stopping playing live as well? I just sort of wonder if whether there are other cultural factors at play. Of course, they did record in, was it it wasn't Chiswick Park, Chiswick House, I think. Recorded the video for this that also then would have promoted things while they were away, and just those sort of general changes in the way that they were conducting themselves and the way that the music industry was promoting things, whether or not they could have had an impact on how the song was received.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, I think the whole thing with touring, we'll probably discuss a little bit further down the line, because the idea of a band like the Beatles not touring was like genuinely unprecedented. And people use that word a lot around the Beatles. Oh, well, the unprecedented. But in this case, I think it's deserved. There was no real um, precedent for that. It was just something that bands did. You had to tour. There was a lot of money in it, so it makes logical sense, for the record label, for people, for the promoters, and for the band trying to make a few quid. So there is a real sense that the band stopping touring is seriously uncharted waters, and there were a lot of contemporary reactions which were pretty much, well, that's it, folks. Who's going to be the next big thing? That's game over. We know that's not how things panned out, but we're just a little bit early for that now. I mean, like you said, they're out on tour whilst this is in the charts, so they are still there. And I think I mean, they're not playing the UK anymore, but I mean, yeah, it's not. It's only a few weeks, and then they're not playing anywhere anymore. So I think we're just a little bit too close to it chronologically for that kind of fallout to be really impacting the success of Paperback Writer Rain. And yeah, it will definitely be something that we'll talk about going forward, though. Yeah, for sure.
Interesting the way you slipped in the B-side there.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, that's where we're going next, right?
It is, yes, yes, and I think that will open up a broader discussion about the way in which B-sides are venerated, in the way perhaps that some singles are not.
Yes.
But there you go. And we should add, by the way, we mentioned the tour, that this was included. This was the only song from that period that they then included in that tour, and they played it pretty regularly throughout the final tour in '66. So kudos to them in that respect, that they were they were packing it in to what was still only what a 30, 35, 40 minute set. So clearly that they felt strongly enough about it, or that McCartney felt strongly enough about it to insist on it being in there. So that's good.
And it's
But
logical, it's our single. We're out on tour. Here's the song. It's a logical promotional tool.
yeah, although you did say to me before we started recording that yes, they did play it, but no, they did not play it well.
Yeah, yes, that is correct. And it again, it's precisely the thing that people talk like what they are doing, what they're capable of achieving in the studio is now outstripping what they're capable of performing on stage. And Paperback Writer is the first example of that. And it's become such a cliche to talk about, oh, well, they could never do Sergeant Pepper on stage or whatever. Sure, but this is kind of the first song that's really true of. Trying to replicate those harmonies when you can't even hear yourself, never mind anybody else, is impossible. Trying to capture that sound is really difficult. This is just technically beyond what could really be achieved meaningfully on a stage at this point in their career. So yeah, it was included, but those harmonies, yeah, if you ever hear any of the live recordings, it's not good. It's not great.
I find it interesting that that lots of covers of this, and a lot of the ones that I dived into either retained the harmony at the start, or the guitar riff pretty much as per, or in most cases both. That there wasn't really an attempt to do something with it. Um, but there's this weird one, I think, from the early '90s of 10cc live in concert, doing the opening harmony and then proceeding to, rather than do the guitar riff, it sort of descended into that kind of slightly cod reggae tone that they occasionally had, which was just bizarre. But there's Chris Christopherson doing quite a faithful cover, and there's lots of examples of that, and I think this is exactly an opportunity to really try and do something a little bit different, unless you're doing an homage. And I think what then comes across to me is that people were just more interested in doing an homage rather than finding their own way about the song, because I think you could probably add quite a lot to it if you bring your own sensibility and your own technique and studio knowledge. But very few people choose to do that, which I find a little bit odd.
I think when it comes to Paperback Writer, I don't know that it's a song that lends itself to a wide range of interpretations. It's very sort of monolithic in what it is, and because it's just like verse chorus, a riff, and that harmony, that block of harmonies, it doesn't I think lend itself to being widely interpreted. The last episode you mentioned Rent by Carter USM, and it is a phenomenal cover version. But the original song, the Pet Shop Boys version of it, is a song which allows itself. It's an open enough song that it can allow itself to that kind of interpretation. Funnily enough, I've recently, thanks to my fella, we've been playing the song now. Brace yourself for the reaction. It's not what you think. Love is All Around. The theme to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, not the Wet 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 monstrosity / Trogs. And the original version, the theme tune is a really sweet, very charming song. I adore Mary Tyler Moore. It's one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. I absolutely love it. And the theme tune is this really sweet little song. But the cover version is by Joan Jett. and the Blackhearts, and it's kind of it's a similar thing. It's taking a relatively slow song and then really driving it through with kind of this like chugged up guitar and all the rest of it. And it's a great cover version. Like if any, I guess this is mostly going to have make sense to our American listeners, given that Mary Tyler Moore wasn't really shown much in the UK. But like if you get the chance to listen to the Joan Jett version of Love Is All Around, just listen to it. It's brilliant. But and again, it's a song which is open enough to allow itself to have those kind of alternative interpretations while still retaining what it was that made the original song great. But Paperback Writer isn't really structured that way. It's a very simple song, like I said, 2 chords, and just like verse, chorus, verse, chorus. There's not a lot of room to do much with it. Does that make sense?
I think also, as we've discussed before, people get a bit intimidated because it's the Beatles and they feel that they can't really mess around with the Beatles, so they don't mess around with the Beatles,
Yeah.
or that they feel that they'll get some sort of cachet by doing something by the Beatles, but they still want to make it recognisably the Beatles, which I think is a bit of a shame. I think one of the benefits of doing something that is a well constructed song, if it is a well constructed song, is that it should allow you to bring something to it and maybe to add your own take as well. But that's fine. I'm not a musician, so I'm not placed in the position of having to cope with those demands. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not the person to ask. I just sort of feel that, wasted opportunity. But then why would you, I suppose from the artist's point of view, why would you then effectively um, update and add to something that already exists? Put your creativity into that when you can spend much more time creating your own songs rather than going, oi, you McCartney, you missed a bit. So I'm going to add this bit in for you.
Well, quite. See, now I'm thinking of Pet Shop Boys covering "Always on My Mind," the Elvis song, which is also a really great cover version.
It's a great version. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
They did that. They put their like creativity and their unique stamp on it while still retaining everything that was good about the original song and blah blah blah. So like there is a valid reason for doing it.
And partly that's updated studio techniques and instrumentation that allows them the space to be able to do that. And even from Rent through to when Carter did the cover, Carter were coming at things from a completely different point of view anyway, which then allowed them the freedom to do it in their way rather than in the Pet Shop Boys way, while still retaining elements of it, but to add a kind of an anger to it, which is a sneer to it, which isn't quite there in the original. So that there are opportunities to do it, but just maybe some people don't have that spark of originality.
That's a very good point to make.
Said
yes.
People who spend a couple of hours every few weeks discussing other people's songs.
Yes. Yes, let's not dig into that too deeply. We'll end up having a massive podcasting existential crisis. This sounds like we're moving towards a conclusion here. Would you like to add anything else about this song that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I mean, I just, it is good. I just prefer it as something that is kind of there, listen to in under 3 minutes, and then move on. It doesn't leave a lasting impression on me, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's effective as an ephemeral pop single, which a lot of pop music is, and so that's why even for all I'm saying, it's still, I don't know, 6 or 7 out of 10.
Well, you're gonna have to pick one.
It's a 7.
It's a 7. Okay, excellent, good stuff. Well, unsurprisingly, I'm going to go a bit higher than that. I'm going to give it 9. I just adore this song so much. So I'm going very, very high in this one. But yeah, that's 7. That's not that's not a poor score. That's not unrespectable.
It's not bad boy.
Is that a word? No, it's certainly not bad boy. That's something that we can at least all be grateful for. Good. Lovely. Let's wrap things up there. You can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We are on Twitter/X @Beatles_ology, and we're Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. Please rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using, so that more people can find the show. It does make a difference, so please do that. It would be much appreciated. Next episode, we will need to run and hide our heads, as it seems we have to cover Rain, so we will flip the disc on that. As always, we hope you join us for it, but until then, keep listening.